It is Election Day here in the state of Texas. Those in the Republican primary here in Lubbock, you've got the race between Gary Boren and Curtis Parrish for Lubbock County Judge. On the Democratic side, get to decide who's going to go up against Governor Greg Abbott in the governor's race. Lippy Valdez and Andrew White running against each other. In studio with me right now, a guy who's happy he does not have a runoff race that he has to participate in. Mike Collier, candidate for lieutenant governor here in the state of Texas. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to be here.
Glad to have you on the program. You're the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. You're going against Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick in this race. And I'm sure what you get a lot of times in interviews is, how do you, Mike Collier, a Democrat in Texas, how are you going to take down a conservative Republican for lieutenant governor?
Well, that's a great question, obviously. It's issues-based. And so it's going to be, folks who are passionate about public education. My job is to reach them and let them know that I have a different approach to it, different point of view. People who are concerned about property taxes will pay very close attention to what I have to say, because we have a huge problem in property taxes. There are things that we need to do from a fiscal control and anti-corruption standpoint that I think are very, very much needed. And so it's really very much an issues-based campaign.
Well, tell folks, before we get into some of those issues, tell folks a little bit about yourself. If they don't know who you are, you've run, I know you've run in a different campaign before, but if they're looking at this race and they don't know who Mike Collier is, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm happy to do that, Chad. So I was a partner for many years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and so I'm a CPA. I was in Houston for a large part of that, and I do merger and acquisition work professionally in the energy arena mostly. And back in 2011, I read in the newspaper that we were going to cut public education by $5.4 billion. As I was reading that article, I had really no interest in Texas politics. But that really stuck with me, because I think public education is very essential to the future of our state. And I didn't believe the premise. And so we were being told that we didn't have money and we had to make these cuts. And I thought to myself, well, no, wait a minute. Property taxes pays for public education, doesn't it? And my property taxes are going up. So how could it be that my property taxes keep going up, and suddenly we find that we don't have enough money for public education? And that really, really bothered me. And the more I looked at it, the angrier I got. I didn't think that our leaders were being honest with us, and I think they were playing games with public education, which is, I'm passionate about it. I mean, I think it's the future of our state. So I ran for comptroller. When the position came open, there were no Democrats willing to run, and I had been a Republican, but they have jogged so far to the right and went to a place that I just didn't recognize them, didn't feel like I belonged anymore, and the Democrats needed somebody to run, and I think that you need political competition to have put good policy. So I ran for comptroller, and I'm still running.
Let me ask you about that, because you said that you used to be a Republican, but they ran too far to the right. Have the Democrats not run too far to the left?
Well, I think some people have that point of view, but, my campaign in 2014 and now, as I say, is very, very issues-oriented. And so people often ask me, because I don't really fit any convenient description. And they ask me, Mike, are you conservative or are you a liberal? And I tell them, I'm an accountant. I'm an analyst. And so I'm very, very pragmatic. And, if we have time this morning, we'll tick through some of the policy points of view that I have in mind. But I have a very, very strong feeling that what's missing in public life, in politics, is somebody who just rolls up their sleeves and deals rationally and honestly with the problems. And because you want to solve them, you want to make it fair. I'm fiscally conservative, but I also know that we need to educate our young people, or else we're in the soup.
So it sounds like education is that your main, is that your number one bullet point, and you would say for your campaign is education?
Oh yeah. There's no question about it, and it's public education.
Okay, so how do we solve public education? How do we solve the and again, I know we don't have like hours here to talk about this,
right.
But what's your plan? How do we solve this public education issue here in Texas?
First, let me say you can't talk about public education unless you're also talking about property taxes, because the two are inextricably linked. And we have a real problem in the state. We've gone in the wrong direction, where our property taxes are going up, and yet our spending in the schools is going down or flat. Here in Lubbock, for example, and I looked at finances in 2010 and compared it to finances in 2017 for 100 of the largest school districts, Lubbock being one of them. On an inflation-adjusted basis in Lubbock, no change in spending over 7 years. A small change, $41 per student is the increase, which is really no increase at all. But taxes have increased per student 4 times that. So we're in a situation in most school districts in the state where our property taxes per student are going up, whereas the spending per student is going down. And the only way to explain that is that the state is not paying its fair share. And you can see that if you look at it from the other direction. Back many years ago, the state paid 60%, school districts paid 40%. That ratio is reversed. And this is a trend that is going to carry on, and Texans are furious. And it creates 2 very real problems. One is we aren't putting enough money into the classroom. And it's one of these things that everybody knows it. So class sizes are too large. Teachers' compensation, and particularly the retirement security, is a lot of anxiety around that. We don't have enough special education teachers, and we all know that. And I could go on and on. We need to put more money in the classroom. But you cannot get more money out of homeowners and small businesses. You can't, because we're paying too much already. And it's because of state fiscal policy. So that is hugely important to me.
And so where do you get the money from the state? How do you put that? Where do you get that money from?
Well, despite what they'll tell you about Democrats, it's not raising taxes. Will not raise taxes. However, there is a defect in the property tax law that allows the owners of large commercial and industrial properties in the state to underpay their taxes. So let me set the scene for you. The Texas Constitution is very clear that property taxes will be based on market value. So if you're a homeowner, I'm a homeowner, it's market value. But if you own a refinery or a $100 million building downtown or any large complex commercial or industrial property, because of defects in the law, you can sue the appraisal district and shake down your value and underpay your taxes. And everyone knows it. And it's a huge number, Chad. It's costing our schools and taxpayers $5 billion a year. And this isn't raising taxes. This is simply enforcing the law. If we can't do that, we're making a mockery of democracy, in essence.
So it is the problem, in your opinion, with public education, is it truly just a spending problem, or is there another component? Are there more components to it? Is there a line where you say this is how much needs to be spent and we're going to do so much better in education?
So let me answer it this way, Chad. If all you did was throw money at it, you would not solve the problem, because that money isn't making it into the classroom. And there's a lot of reasons why money doesn't make it into the classroom. So there's also a management problem. And so you have to solve both. I'm going to go and close that loophole and recover more money, and it's going to be the large corporations that come up with that money. If you do that, and we have to do that, you must also at the same time assure them that the money's being spent in the classroom. And it can bleed off in so many different ways. There's no question that there's bloated bureaucracy in public education. We all know that. We know that there are unsavory contracts. Whoever it is that changes the oil in the school buses and does your tires and so forth. I mean, are we getting the best deal we possibly can? So there's all sorts of what we in the merger and acquisition arena call value leakage. Mm-hmm. And so what I intend to do is 2 things. I already mentioned closing that loophole. At the same time, we must recharge and reinvigorate an independent audit and performance review capability in the state, which is no longer independent. It's not functioning. It's dead. So we have to do both. You do those 2 things, and you have more money for public education. It finds its way into the classroom. Then you begin to solve the problem.
Visiting with Mike Collier, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Before we take our first break, and we have you here for 2 segments, before we take our first break, I want to ask you, what are some other differences when it comes to between you and your opponent, Dan Patrick? What are some of the other differences between you two?
Well, the major difference is Dan Patrick talks about vouchers, and vouchers are not popular in Texas. They've been voted down 50 times, something like that, in the last 10 years, and he continues to pound that drum. And I don't understand it. I just know that it's wrong. Dan, frankly, is also dishonest about property taxes. He's not dealing honestly with the issue. The reason why property taxes are going up is because of state fiscal policy, not local policy. And county commissioners know that, and mayors know that, and school districts know that. Those are major differences. Also, we don't have an independent audit or performance or integrity capability in the state. An iron curtain has dropped around what I consider to be a political machine. Political machines are not good for anybody, and so we need to have a fiercely independent audit, performance, and integrity capability. And I have some innovative ideas around that. For example, just one example, and I know we're short on time, Chad, but we had a state auditor who quit, John Keel, a good man, well-respected, strong man, quit in 2015, and he hasn't been replaced. And it's Dan Patrick's job to replace him, and he hasn't replaced him.
Visiting with Mike Collier, candidate for Lieutenant Governor here in the state of Texas. We'll go ahead. We'll take the break. When we come back, we're going to get into the issue of the Second Amendment. We're going to get into some other big issues impacting the state of Texas with our guest, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Mike Collier, here on the Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. All right, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Joining me in studio, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Mike Collier. And obviously, last Friday, you had the shooting at Santa Fe High School down in Santa Fe, Texas, something that has really dominated some headlines here in the state of Texas. I know you tomorrow are going to release a plan as to what you would like to see the state of Texas do. Talk about that a little bit, and let's say you were Lieutenant Governor right now. What would you like to see the state of Texas? How would you like to see them respond, I guess, to this latest shooting?
I think there's no question that we need a special session of the legislature, and because I think parents rightfully want their students to be safe when they come back in the fall. And it's heartbreaking, the Santa Fe situation, and I'm a parent, and I would take my sons to school sometimes, and I felt they were safe in my care. And I just can't imagine what a parent feels like now, wondering whether they're safe in the school's care. So we must do something. And I'm calling for a special session because I want to see what these guys are made of, meaning Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick. And we're hearing talk. Fine. I want action, and that's what Texans want. And if you think about the timeline, what I'm going to propose is a very aggressive timeline, which is to say, we all pretty much know where the solutions lie, and we'll talk about it. It has to do with mental health. It has to do with physical security of schools, and it also has to do with guns. And we know what the problems are. We know the direction that we need to go. I don't think we need an interminable round of discussions. I think we should develop a plan, a comprehensive crisis response plan, by the 15th of June, which then allows for a 10-day public comment period, which then allows for the finalization of the plan by June 25th, which then allows for the assembly of the legislature on the 26th, with the plan approved and executed by the governor on July 1st, so that we then have 8 weeks, roughly, to implement, because if it involve, and it should involve counselors, and it should involve monitors, and it should involve technology, and a whole host of things. They all have to work in concert, and that would give us 8 weeks to drive towards implementation. Failure to do so, I think, is unacceptable.
The governor's holding roundtable meetings this week, starting today.
Right.
Do you think those are bad? That's a bad idea?
No. I think it's important, and it's law enforcement. I regret that he doesn't involve teachers and parents and students. No, it's important. But what I'm saying is you've got to move with speed. In other words, is this just talk that will drag out and then we'll consider what we'll do in the next legislative session? That's unacceptable. We need to move fast. It's very straightforward what we need to do. I think it's going to cost money because we need more counselors and we need more technology to provide for the physical security of our students. And then there's a handful of things that we need to think about. And I'm a pro-Second Amendment guy, and I own a gun. This ain't taking away guns. And anybody who says that I'm not pro-Second Amendment is being dishonest. But there's some things that we need to do, for example, to tighten up background checks. And all Democrats, most independents, and many Republicans think that we need to tighten up background checks.
When you say tighten up background checks, what do you mean?
Well, I think of it in two categories. First of all, there's a problem with the information. And we saw that in Sutherland Springs.
Right.
And so there's an IT, information technology component. I'm not an IT guy, nor am I a database expert, but I think we all know that the information is not finding it to the background checkers timely. So we need to solve that problem. I also have
that's
some.
a federal issue, though, right?
Well, I think
What
we can
the
provide.
state do that? What can the state do?
Well, I think we can provide leadership to the extent it's federal. We can provide leadership to the extent the state can accelerate it. We can do that. We're a big and powerful state, and with a president who pays very close attention to what we have to say in Texas, as do all national leaders. So we can take the lead on this. So part of it is information technology. Then there's also this concern, and I get it. A gun owner is free to transact. You can give that gun to a relative. You can sell that gun to somebody, and that's fine. But there has to be some way that we can approach this so that there's some background check involved. And for example, let's say that I have a gun and I want to give it to you, or I want to sell it to you. I don't see why it's unreasonable to require me to do a background check on you. And you can do that inexpensively. Or perhaps you have a license, and that's fine. That ought to be good enough.
Yeah.
But if I don't know anything about you, and you don't have a license, and then I sell you the gun, perhaps I should remain responsible.
Let me ask you this. Isn't that taking advantage, though, of what happened in Santa Fe? Because we haven't seen, and I could be wrong on this, but we haven't seen that happen in any of these mass shootings. It is normally a child who gets a gun from their parents, or they find the gun inside the home. They're not getting it from some guy who is, doing a private transaction. This guy got a shotgun and a .38 revolver. I believe it was his father's, went into a school and started shooting up the place. I don't see what you've proposed would have stopped what we saw in Santa Fe or in Florida or in any of the other school shootings that we've seen.
Let me put it to you this way, and I'm going to draw on my lessons from the oil business. In the oil industry is a very dangerous, very, very, very dangerous business. And we approach safety from the standpoint of reducing the inherent risk. You don't completely eliminate the risk, but you reduce it, and you take reasonable steps to reduce the risk. No one of the many things that we should do alone will solve the problem, nor will, even if we do everything, comprehensively and rigorously, will we reduce the risk to zero. So we have to be realistic, but we can greatly reduce the risk and do it quickly. And again, no one thing will solve this problem, but there are many things that we can do. And the expectation of parents and students is that we do these things. And the reason why I think that our leaders presently won't act, and I do not believe that they will act, is because it takes money. Because if we're going to hire counselors, for example, or monitoring equipment, or the things that you need to do from a physical security standpoint, that's going to take money. They also won't go anywhere near guns because of the politics of it, which I really regret. Again, I'm a Second Amendment guy. I own a gun. There was a time where we could talk about gun safety. We can't anymore because it's been politicized. And that I really regret. And that's what I think and Texans are ready for a change.
We only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to get to a couple of things here. Would you, Beto O'Rourke, who's running for Senate, he has said that he doesn't believe the AR-15, which wasn't used in Santa Fe, but the AR-15 should not be sold to Americans. Do you agree with that or disagree?
No, I don't immediately agree with him on that. I mean, I think we have laws presently on the books that say that you can't have a machine gun. I mean, machine guns are illegal. And, I don't claim to be a gun expert, but my sense is that it's really a repeating rifle that's the real danger, and they're already illegal.
Mike Collier, candidate for lieutenant governor, Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. Real quick, got about 40 seconds or so. Tell folks how they can find out more information. 30 seconds.
I've got a website. It's collierfortexas.com. And would invite everybody to come along. And if you're passionate about public education, if you're tired of being ripped off on property taxes, have a look.
All right. Mike Collier, Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. As always, thank you very much, and we'll visit with you next time.
Thank you, Chad.